Hello everyone. This is Mary here. I'll spend with you another hour today to talk a little bit about how to make our feedback transformative. How to make sure that once you set that feedback, it actually doesn't go unnoticed, and what to do to actually transform the structural conversations into a learning one, so that we don't have to really repeat our feedback several times to the same person about the same topic. So I can see some people are joining in. Let's give everyone a minute to settle. We still have 3 minutes to start. Just one more time. I'm Mary Sankovska, and I'm going to talk about transformative feedback today. So if you are a manager, if you are leading people, if you are leading teams, also if you are just looking for tool to improve your effectiveness of communication, that webinar is definitely relevant to you, and can really give you some little tips and tricks on how to make sure that once you communicate, you are actually going to draw some learning from each communication. I can see that we still have a few minutes. Let's recap what are the objectives for today before we start. So I will first look into the structure of the conversation to create safe space and natural flow of giving empowering feedback. So I cannot stress that more. The unique space that we are giving and having during a conversation, that has everything to do with how our feedback will be received and to what extent it will allow any sort of transformation. Then we'll move on to structuring the feedback itself, and I won't tell you more before we start about that part, but I'm sure that some of you are going to be really pleased with the tools that I'll share. And then our third objective for today is to discuss a little bit how to transform a structural conversation into a learning one, which is largely based on the approach that we take in giving feedback. Then we'll move on to dive a little bit into a concept of what I call organic accountability. So how to ensure that our employees or direct reports or supervisors, because yes, we can give feedback and we should give feedback also up the chain. So that's the people we give the feedback to, they are organically empowered to action, and will really take those things that we've discussed further. And finally, we'll try to close off as the time allows with how to create a strategy to really bring the feedback as an ongoing process. So something that is inseparable from organizational culture. Not only, something that we jump into and out when we need or when it's already too late because some issues arise. So really, feedback is all about creating supportive structure. So it is not something that you would start thinking about at the moment where you've got already thousands of problems in your team. It's something that you've got to really create from the very beginning. And this culture, that is a culture of conversation, is definitely something that a lot of employees are going to be looking at the trends that we are observing now in the workplace environment. All right, I'm glad that you've all decided to join me today, and I would like to really honor the schedule here, and I can see that it's already 1 past the time we were supposed to start, so let's get started. One more time, the objectives for today. The structure of the conversation itself. Then we are going to look into the structure of the feedback, and how to really facilitate that feedback giving process. Then we'll jump into creating a learning conversation. So we'll discuss what is a learning conversation, what's the difference between learning conversation and a structural one, and also what is this thing that I like calling organic accountability, and why is it so important to really create that within our employees, finishing off with the strategy and looking a little bit, depending on the time, on how to create a conversation structure, conversation culture in our organizations. Wow, that's a lot. I'll be talking a lot, but I'll check in with you guys after each module, so after each objective. So if you have any questions, please just type them right away into a chat box. And if we do not manage to answer all the questions with our limited time today, I'll make sure to get back to you in an email with my answer, so that we can really ensure that you guys take the most out of this webinar today. So please don't be shy, just type in all the questions, type in all the things that you would like to learn more about, and we'll see what we can do about that. All right, now, as we know what we'll talk about, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I chose this topic, and why actually I feel qualified to share my knowledge about that topic with you today. So I'm Mary Sękowska, and I am a certified leadership coach, a CEO and a founder of Creative Brain Academy. I'm working with women leaders globally, delivering online coaching one-on-one, and also working with organizations of all sizes, delivering team coaching and professional certification training in coaching, emotional intelligence, talent development, and of course, self-coaching techniques. So there are lots of things that we can actually do ourselves to help us survive those most pressuring or stressful moments. But that's not what it's this webinar today about. So I established Creative Brain Academy really to create and deliver powerful tools to, first and foremost, women in leadership. It is my mission to really empower and support each woman in maximizing their potential through coaching and through training. If you're a woman, please join our network on LinkedIn, and I'm going to just paste the link for our network into a chat box. So if you follow that, you can join me and lots of other female leaders or women that really aspire to one day get into the leadership positions, and share with us all of experiences and knowledge. We also have we've really just started recently, but we are planning to have lots of content like articles, webinars, and many more. So please look at the chat. I've just sent to you the link. So if you're a woman, please join the LinkedIn group so we can stay in touch. Now, if you're interested, why women and what's so different about that, you can book a quick chat, just sending into the chat box now the word me, and I'll get back to you personally to talk a little bit more about leadership coaching for women and what makes it so unique. All right, well, I've been talking a little bit about women, so do Creative Brain actually discriminate against men? Well, hell no. We need them as much as they need us, hopefully. And I actually started my coaching with men, believe it or not. I will actually start with that story a little bit further on in our webinar. So Creative Brain really strives to co-create the future where, this inequality in a workspace is non-existent. So that is why we need to really work on both fronts. And I want to emphasize, working on both fronts does not necessarily mean using the same methods So I do believe that we need to employ different methods working on both different fronts. Like this webinar, for example. So welcome all the men, and thank you for joining us. I mean, power is in the end in diversity, isn't it? So we've got some learning to do, guys. So how will we do that? Well, let me go off the camera so that I can make sure that all the slides and everything is in place as it should be, as we are now diving into that learning, okay? And I don't really like throwing at people huge amounts of theories or statistics, and that you really, if you'd like, you can really just Google it and read it for yourself. I'd be happy to recommend any reading for the ambitious ones after this webinar. But today I really want to tell you a story from my experience, and we'll treat it a little bit as a study case, so that you can see how different solutions can be implemented in real life. All right then, let's get started. And the first objective, so the importance of conversation structure. Let me give you a little background to our case here. So back in the days when I worked in London in Remax, the largest real estate agency franchise in the world, as a brand manager, giving feedback was something that I found especially challenging. So in my situation, I actually started as a trainee in a busy office with estate agents having more years of experience in the industry that I was alive. So I quickly discovered, me being an agent, that didn't really click well. But what the owner of the brand recognized is that I am a good person for organizational matters, for strategic thinking, and that I actually can keep an eye on many projects, staying on top of them at the same time. So I worked my ass off, and I actually got promoted to the position of a branch manager within 4 months. So that's where the fun started, really. For those of you who don't know London, it's a true mixture of culture. So in my office, we did not have 2 people coming from the same culture. It was amazing. At the same time, that's what made it so challenging. So now imagine me. I'll jump on the camera again, like imagine me, previously a trainee, 20 something years old, a woman, and being in a position to conduct, one-on-ones with agents that are true experts in their fields, 50 plus years old, men, commonly from a culture where women should not brief without men's permission. So as a new manager, one of my objectives was really to unify a very independent at the time team and create so-called community, right? So I needed to really reinvent myself a little bit, because that trainee image did not really fit anymore the task that I was up for. So I had to stop being a student, sort of, and yet sympathize with all the agents not to lose their trust, because that would be rather a step backwards than forward, right? So our case begins with an Iranian agent, well established in a commercial property sector, taking lots of pride in his senior position and expert image. So my first big real test of leadership skills. So after the branch manager announced my promotion to all the team members, I felt that this sort of feel of uncertainty spread across the office, none knew, no one knew what will be the role that I'm placed in, and how will that impact them. So what will that mean to them? So as we were at the growth stage, one of the first tasks I had was to optimize the process of performance review of the agents. So as for a perfectionist, I worked for some time on new, better, of course, in my opinion, version. So we decided in the end to increase the frequency of one-on-ones and announced that we'll sit with each agent to create his own personalized professional development plan that will be later taken into account when looking at performance review. The time of the first one-on-one with my Iranian agent, I absolutely adored him as a person. He actually reminded me a little bit of my dad, with grey mustache and stuff. But as soon as I started telling him what's the purpose of our meeting, and that it is actually to look at his performance and based on that build the development plan, I could feel in my bones his resistance. I remember that just like it was yesterday. As you can imagine, we haven't had a productive meeting. It took us a while, or actually it took me a while, to determine what would be a safe space. And here we are arriving in this very first key element. So when you look at the slides, you can see three sort of different scenarios. So what was my goal for that conversation is to create a space where I'm, as a feedback giver, kind of at the same level as a feedback receiver, so we can together co-create a certain solution that will be a win-win situation for both the organization and for him and his personal development. Now, how he perceived me establishing the goal of a conversation as looking at his performance, well, he saw me as a feedback giver way above him as a feedback receiver, which was not aligned really with his culture. It was not aligned really with his hierarchy, association of the younger and an older person, more and less industry experience. So that really created sort of an imbalance in his perception. And then giving that safe space, as I told you, it took me a while to actually realize what that safe space would mean for him. So it actually meant that a feedback receiver, so he himself, is in this higher position than a feedback giver. And let me come back to that one a little bit further on. So really, giving transformative feedback happens only in a unique space that emerges in the moment between a person giving the feedback and the one receiving it. So what do I mean by that? Well, giving feedback and giving transformational feedback differs in a way that giving feedback just like that can happen in any conversation, any setting, and it's just an exchange of views really. But giving transformative feedback happens only in this unique space. And it's unique not only to two people that are talking with each other, but it's also unique to a certain moment, and it is unique to a certain setting. So the space is really different for different people. I'll say actually more. Transformative feedback really starts with silence. I'll repeat that one more time. Transformative feedback really starts from silence. My agent truly opened to me for the first time when I let him own the conversation. So guys, you can imagine we sat together and I shared with him what are the current challenges that I observe, not really making it, personal or anything, or position attached. I let him voice his challenges and concerns. I sat silent for like 15 minutes and he was elaborating on how he approached a certain challenge, really trying to a little bit show me how I could approach mine, So this creating of the safe space where we were equal wouldn't really work for him. So let's go back to that slide, and you can see that my idea of co-creating was really so much different from having that space that allows him to open in his mind. It was him elaborating on how he approaches the challenges so that I can learn, you know? And that's all right. That's all right. I think sometimes putting yourself a little bit lower to let other person shine, you know, really enables to unpack all of these issues, the thoughts that are kept and otherwise not said. So during that time, as my only task was really to sit silently, I could focus on true listening. So I could really be present and hear what he says. You can think like, yeah, of course, every time you hear what somebody says, but really listen to that. And there is a difference. So, but by that time, I was already after my first coaching training. So I guess I borrowed a little bit an approach from there. So thinking about the purpose of feedback. Well, for me, feedback, it's about supporting an individual to really maximize his potential. So we support a person in doing that themselves. It cannot be just talking figures, you know, on one's performance or attitude. There's also a very practical reason that should stop us from really giving standard feedback. We as humans are very prompted to fall into biases and biased thinking. So allowing our mind to think in a linear way, allowing our brain to just switch into those typical analytical processing when giving feedback, we are so much more prompted to fall into a bias trap. So once again, look at the slide. So I really like that quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Well, I mean, like that speaks for itself. Really, feedback has to. Really, feedback makes only sense when it is received. You know, it's not only about putting it out there. That's why we can not only really talk numbers, we can share by sharing our opinion, you know. So once again, giving transformative feedback starts from silence, and it starts from listening and allowing the other person to form a space he or she feels comfortable with. And now the challenge there is also that you being open to really accepting that space that's been created by other person, that's something that's really challenging. That's something that's really hard to train. And it is one thing to listen, but another to let go of your own expectation and direction that you've chosen for a particular talk, for a particular conversation. So really, as you remember, my agent created a space where he, as a feedback receiver, was higher than me as a feedback giver, and that has had to be accepted by me in that situation. So you as a leader, as a person who's giving the feedback, really have to be open to letting go of whatever you imagine this conversation is going to be, and whatever you imagine this space is going to be. All right, so we've arrived at the first, completed the first objective, let's say, talking about the conversation structure and really what it is, that space, and what it is to construct that space. Any thoughts so far? Questions? And guys, if you have anything, and if the speed is okay of how we're going through the things, please just drop me the message in the chat box. Great. I can see that some people are letting me know that fast but but intensive and nice. So thank you for that. Great. So if there are no questions so far, let's go on and think about, so the agent unpacked, right? So back to the story, the agent unpacked. Finally, he had the space and he felt comfortable to really share. But what do we do when someone unpacks the contents of his brain and it turns out it's a mess? It's a big mess, which normally it is, you know. We are so information overloaded that, you know, our minds are just clouded, our thoughts and the focus, clarity, all those things are blurred. So it is hard to have a structured mind nowadays. It is really just, you know, all things mixed up together. So when somebody unpacks, and if you create that space, you also have to be ready that things that will come out are most of the time really messy. There are lots of different topics coming up, just being put on the table. So what do we do? Well, that's where the specific structure of a feedback comes in. So what's the structure? We basically recap what we've had and we go silent again, leaving it to the employee or a supervisor to choose what is the best way for them at the moment to receive support. So remember, feedback is all about support in maximizing potential. So we go silent again. We let them decide. How do they want to look at things? And we listen. And we listen. That's really it. So we can ask a question within this limited time together. What would be a good way to proceed? So what would be a good way for us together to take that further so that you can get to a place that you want to be in? So how do we turn that normal conversation where I have a feel it's very much, most of the time it's very much task-oriented, action plan, goals-focused, into a truly learning one? Well, let's start by looking at the difference between a structural and a learning conversation. So in a typical conversation where people give feedback, we focus on communicating our perspective and strategizing for action steps. We use words like how and why did you do what you did, setting really our conversational partner's brain deep into analytical thinking. So he really goes all the way like that, you know. He's just processing, you know, information like a computer a little bit, you know. We're looking for just logical correlations. Now, being in that analytical thinking might not be the best way to really change something in a sustainable way and maintain that changed thing for a long time. So have you ever came up with an amazing plan, you know, to anticipate some challenge or even you know, organize your day, and you had all the information needed, you really had all the know-how, you thought it through, you know, all pros and cons, and you really wanted to achieve that goal, yet nothing happened. Well, that's because you have never allowed your brain to reflect and discover what is the underlying issue behind the challenge that you're trying to accommodate. So you went straight away into accountability talk. And that brings nothing more than an outline of a map, if you imagine. So yet you've got sort of like a draft of a map, but you don't really have a fuel. Well, you actually don't even have a vehicle, you know, to move from one point to the other. You've got an outline of a map. Well, that's not really helpful, right? If you have just this one piece. So the key to creating a learning conversation is to spend quality time on expanding the mind and heightening the awareness, not only around the situation, but around that particular person within that situation. So every person creates a whole, which is the current environment. It creates a whole with the current environment that he is in, and he needs to recognize how he perceives that relationship between these two, between the current environment and between himself, and the person himself. So really, you are kind of helping build a big picture for your feedback receiver. So as you can see on the slides, you start with, of course, paying attention, observing, and really listening, moving forward to picking on emotional words that are, sort of packed somewhere in between the lines or set by your feedback receiver, and then you help the person to understand how the things relate. So really, the two questions that you're only allowed to ask in this stage of the conversation is, what do you mean by this thing? What do you mean by X? And then, how is X related to Y? And you really support that person in figuring that out. Figuring out, not only seeing the dots, but also connecting them. So when does the magic happen? I guess that's like the major question of that webinar. So when we create the right space, when we listen actively and stimulate reflective thinking. So instead of passing on our perspective, we ask the question. So what do you mean by this? How is this related to that? And most importantly, we facilitate the process of our report to realize, discover potential gaps, and find the meaningful focus. So the key here is facilitating, not overtaking, not directing, not leading. It's really about facilitating. Feedback givers should focus on asking the questions, listening, and being a little bit like a catalyst of chemical reactions. You are there to create the mixture for success in that particular discussed aspect, but you are not the one writing the recipe. So all of that really results in this organic accountability. So moving on to the next part, this is really my term, at least I think, I don't know, but it really is something that I like calling organic accountability, because it reflects so much the meaning of what we really need to create. So the ultimate goal of our feedback conversation is really to create that organic accountability. So what it is, well, that you've created it when your employee or your direct report or person you're giving the feedback to realizes the best possible way to overcome the challenge. And what is more important, he feels that this particular solution for this particular challenge is crafted for his personality, his beliefs, and is aligned with his values. So it's really the most personalized thing on earth. Now try stopping a person like that from achieving what he goes for. It really makes a difference, and you can really sense it within a conversation when the person gets to that stage when they are, okay, now I've got absolute clarity. I know what to do. I know how to do it. I know what needs my attention. So coming back to my agent, our conversation would eventually last, for about 45 minutes, within which we would always determine the focus of our talk, and based on the current need. So one more time, remember, the space and the focus is relevant to a person that you want to give the feedback to, not to you yourself, and also to a certain setting. Then we would explore the particular terms and what they mean and how are they relevant to our common goal in that space of giving feedback. So really looking into that clouded space of our minds and picking up the things, seeing how these things are relevant to our higher focus on our higher goal, and then creating sort of a funnel, like a highway to that goal, where nothing else is allowed to be on the road, so that we really have the clarity on what needs to happen, how it needs to happen, and how does that suit me. I'm talking from a feedback receiver perspective into achieving my goal. And I cannot stress it enough to really spend that quality time on getting that awareness around what is the focus, what is the goal of our talk that has to be chosen by our feedback receiver. So now you can wonder, like, okay, so I want to talk with somebody about one thing, but then his goal will be about something else. You always can bring your observation into the conversation and pose it really as an observation and ask again, how does that relate to your goal? So we would have explored different terms, what they mean, how they are relevant, and then lastly we would arrive at the point where he would realize what needs his attention in order to really make a leap forward, not a step, really to make a leap forward. All right, so how are we doing? How are we doing, guys? Everyone still with me? Any questions, thoughts, maybe feedback? So I can see that our time is running off. It's flying, really, guys. Lastly, if I might just finish off with like the strategy part. So implementing feedback as an inseparable part of an organizational culture is really crucial, and you've got to be mindful that organizational cultures, I'm sure you're aware of that, they are something that is deeply rooted in the beliefs, values, and assumptions of the people that create that culture. So the very same approach, starting from listening and being silent, that is the way how you can pick the windows of opportunity, how to initiate creating a conversational culture. And it's really this culture of conversation within an organization is really the part of creative leadership. It's so much needed. Now people want to voice themselves. People really feel sort of allowed and also responsible to themselves, sort of to express what are their opinions, what are their values, and we need to take care of that. We need to listen and anticipate and really show them that their voice have been heard, and that way we will create those little windows of opportunity where we have to put ourselves out first, stretch ourselves to being open and accept whatever the space they will create to share with us, and really having that space established and having people having people that are aware that this space is there and that it is easy for them to create a space that they will feel comfortable with, that is really the very first step of integrating feedback manner within our organizational culture. I would like to be really mindful of our time together. If you're interested in any specific aspects, of implementation, feedback into the strategy, or the conversation itself, the feedback or the science behind it, please just feel free one more time to just type your questions to the chat box, and I'll get back to you after the webinar to really make sure that you can draw some great learnings from today. So with that being said, brings me to the topic of really how can we take this even further, right? So if you are interested in really polishing your skills into not only really feedback giving, but really more on the skills that are needed for that feedback giving, like active listening, like powerful questioning, like the ability to pick the bits and pieces and allow the person that we're talking with to make the connections and to heighten their awareness. We're going to be running a training program. It's a full certification training program approved by the International Coach Federation, giving you the first level of coaching certification. We're going to be running that in Amsterdam very soon in October, between 8th and 11th. And we've got the super early bird tickets on sale now. So that's the time that you can really bring your learning further and dive really into depths of the conversational science and building those skills that will allow you to transform the conversations from structural ones to really learning ones, and really enable you to empower other people for creating sustainable change. And I think that is really, really important in our current business environment, to be able as a leader to have impactful conversations and not only inspire people, but really support them in a transparent way in maximizing their potential. So I hope that joining us for our full certification program in Amsterdam, it's going to be 4 days in person, very intensive days, and then we will take it online to our learning platform. So we're delivering that training together with Coach Masters Academy, and we are working, we are actually delivering that training in already 40 different countries across the globe. And recently, also our training has a chance now to become a master's degree on one of the US universities. So really a proven program with a proven methodology to take your leadership skills, to take your conversational skills, to take your way of communicating to a very different level. So after those 4 days, we will switch to an online platform, and there we will continue for another 35 hours. So altogether, it's 75-hour training program, where you will be able to put yourself in different roles of the role of a coach, of the role of a coachee, a client, or a direct report, and in the role of a facilitator of a conversation. So really lots of learning there, really intensive program, and it's really truly transformational. So please join me in that one. If you're interested, just leave me a comment or type in a box your contact details, so that I can reach back out to you and tell you a little bit more about yeah, about our program, and I really hope to see you guys, some of you guys there. So now, any questions? So we are actually quite good on time. I think like I've been speaking really fast. So any questions? Do we have anything that's popping up in your heads and that you really would like to know a little bit more about? And so don't be shy, just type in the chat box. Let me have a look. What do we have there? All right, so the first question is about, let me go back to the slide. So about those questions that we are allowed to use within a conversation. Well, so you can be creative in that respect. I gave you just 3 of them, right? So the first one you can see now on the slides: within this limited time together today, what would be a good way to proceed? And that's it, and leave it to a person. So imagine a conversation where you're like, okay, so I think I would need some, like some help with my time management or something. And then the person goes silent. And then instead of us really immediately unpacking all of our knowledge, to that person and overwhelming them even more already with their clouded mind and with not so much of a clarity, we actually just ask, okay, so within that time together that we've got today, what would be a good way for us to explore that, to proceed? And then we go silent and we really leave it back to them to decide. Now, looking at the following 2, what do you mean by something and how X is related to Y? So in an example, I could say, okay, so I really want to make a right decision. Well, that's cool. Now I can go on about how to make the right decision. But now the real question is, are we talking about the same thing? Is my right the same as your right? Is my technique to get the right decision is going to be as supportive as you getting your right decision? So instead of really immediately jumping in and trying to help, we have to clarify. We have to make that person also aware, because a lot of times we just throw out something and we ourselves, we don't know what we meant by that. So when you ask that question, what do you mean by this thing, it can sometimes derail that person a little bit. And by derailing their thought process, we really kind of open up the possibility for them to reflect. And that is really that whole science behind that. So it's reflective learning that we're trying to create here. And how is the X related to Y? Well, if we stick with this right decision, let's say, and a person has shared with us, going on about elaborating about his challenges, that it's really important for them to make sure that the boss will be happy with that, or that the particular team member will be happy with that. So, well, we can then pick those 2 aspects and ask, well, okay, so you mentioned that the right decision for you is this, this, and that. And now you mentioned I can observe that the opinion of that particular person is extremely important to you. So how are those 2 things related? So it's really, sort of, I'm giving you a little bit like tools that you can use within a conversation. There are, of course, many more. There are many more questions and the ways of structuring your questions to put the brain of a person that you're talking with into those vertical aspect of learning rather than just analytical one. So okay, I hope that answers your question about knowing more how to use those questions. Now, what do we have else there? So we have still a few minutes. Let me pick. Okay, so let's do that one. So one of you asked, so this transformative feedback starts with silence, but we've got limited time, right? I mean, of course, we cannot go silent for for an hour, letting the person, you know, unpack everything that has happened in their life. But really the skill is here to be able to, by that silence, let know the other person that it's up to them to create a space within which they will feel comfortable with sharing, and within which it will be up to them how we explore different things. And it will be not just our view, and it will be not just our comfortable space, but it will be really all about them. So who knows better what's good for you if not yourself? I mean, sometimes, of course, it's difficult to realize that for ourselves, but that's why we need to be those catalysts and really facilitate that process of getting that thing out of a person. So really getting out of them, how do they think, what do they think is the best way to approach a certain thing? And that will really enable us to create this organic accountability there. All right, guys, amazing. So great learning. One more time, remember about our coach professional certification program. So it gives you the first level certification of being a coach, and it really dives really into depth in conversation, in skills and science of positive psychology, emotional intelligence, and how all of that is related to our way of communicating and to creating impactful conversations, so that we can help others, support them in creating sustainable changes for themselves and later on for our organizations. You know, organizations are people, and people are constantly changing, and we've got to be able to have those impactful conversations so that we navigate them within that constantly changing environment. All right. Amazing. So I guess this is really the end of our meeting today. I'm really glad we could do that, and I hope that you will join us for next webinar. So I'm going to type in the chat box now the website address where you will be able to find our full webinar schedule, so that if you would like to, if you like this webinar and you would like to learn more, just go there to that page and book your spots for, I think we've got up till now the full schedule for until the end of August, if I'm not mistaken. So you can plan your holidays in a very productive way and join us for the learning. So it is mycreativebrain.eu/webinar booking. So there you go, that's the link. And one more time, let us know what you thought about the webinar. Even if you are not with us now, but you're listening, you are listening on days after, still leave us a comment to let us know how did you like it, so that we can also improve, you know, and make sure that the next webinars will become better and better. So, okay, with that, I would like to thank you all, guys, for joining me on this early morning, and I hope that we've created some learning here, and that we'll be able to really take that learning further. All right. Have a great day, and I'll be waiting for all the other comments and other questions. So you can always ask, and I'll make sure to come back to you. You will find the recording of that session within the event page on Facebook, but also we'll send a copy to you so that you can review it at any time later on. All right. Great, amazing. Have a great day, and take that learning further. I'm Mary Sinkowska, and it is my pleasure to really be with you today in the morning. Bye.